Hello again. Today I wanted to talk about something we haven't really seen yet, which is wall targets. Wall targets are pretty much made out of manufactured type style lumber. Um, you can buy it at the hardware store, which makes it very convenient. Um, Another good thing about it is if you have places where there are infestations such as the emerald ash borer, you can transport the wood from across state lines without any worries, as opposed to using a natural round, which is obviously going to have some concerns as far as infestation or the spread of infestation. We don't want that. We want our trees to grow up strong and healthy so we can cut them down later for targets. Um, Economically, you could probably make one such as the mini wall, which is this one, for $20 to $25, which roughly is about what it would cost you for a night at an axe bar. Um, Axe bars often use the same style or wooden targets. I guess it's probably because just finding rounds is in that quantity is very difficult for them to do. The nice thing about another nice thing about the wooden targets, especially the board targets, is you can take the boards out and replace them one at a time. Whereas when a round or a biscuit or a cookie, whatever you want to call it, when that fails, it's pretty much done unless you can flip it around and use the back side. With the board targets, especially if you're consistent and hitting the middle board like mine, you can flip the board, pull that one board out, replace it. If you eventually chew up a sideboard, you can replace it. And often you can find the wood as scrap lumber somewhere. So they're not terribly expensive. They can get expensive when you get into the big targets. When you're making like a 4 by 8 foot target, it can add up pretty quick, as well as the weight and the portability. I like them. I don't use them as much as a lot of people, simply because I have the good fortune of having some wooden rounds supplied to me by friends. One of the harder things about using board targets is its ability to accept, in particular, axes. And when you see people with the axe bars and they're sticking them, they're doing a pretty good job, because the way grain or the fibers in trees grow, of course you all know what trees look like. It's a linear strand. So when you're looking at a board, you're actually looking at the strands running the length of the board. Whereas when you're looking at a stump or a round, you're looking at the strands end on. What that means is that when a blade hits that board, it has to go between the strands, or you have to cut through the strands. Preferably you don't want to do that. Your axes, though, do need to be pretty sharp, and the more point on one, the better. So a lot of folks like to use the Francisca. I'm not fond of it because the handle's kind of round. Good old standby camp hatchet works really well. It's got a lot of mass to the head. It tends to have a little bit of a point here. My favorites, the Viking axes, are a little bit more rounded, and I actually find they're a little bit more difficult to use. So I'm going to do a couple of throws at the standard mini wall, and hopefully I'll get a couple to stick, and then I'll actually try to get a couple not to stick so you can see. In other words, if you're throwing straight, that axe should be hitting straight. If it's hitting at an angle, it's got to cut through the fibers. It's not going to do as good a job. As you can see, that last one rolled off. I didn't quite have the angle right. Optimally, in my opinion, for the boards, you really want to be hitting so that this point, the top, presents a little bit more prominently. I'm actually going to try and miss. I'm going to try to get the axe to hit this way, and you'll see it may hit cleanly, but it'll fall out. one stuck. And I'm not going to put another one in. You get the idea. Another thing you can do is as your board targets get old, and if you do have some rounds, you can drill a hole through the back and simply lag bolt on around, and that works perfectly well. I like those as well. So now the tricky part is when you start to get into the larger board targets. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, of course, is the grain, as we just discussed. The other is the board may not be fully supported throughout its length, so it has a little bit of reverb that could actually shake perfectly good throws out as it bounces and flexes. The other thing, though, and this is the key, this is what I really want to talk about, is your distance. When you're doing novelty throws or competitions, the targets can be as much as 7 feet up in the air all the way down to 1 foot. This board's seen some better days, but what you really need to start doing is thinking in two primary focuses. You don't want to be trying to change your grip. I mean, that's an option, but what you really want to do is think with your feet and think with your eyes. And by that, what's going to happen is, depending on where you're throwing on that target, you're going to have to move your feet. Most of us throw at about a 48-inch target. For me, that's about 11.5 feet with the knives, maybe a little bit more, a little bit less. But when I'm throwing it at 7 feet, I can't do that. If I throw at 11.5 feet up high, it over rotates. So what I've got to do is I've got to get closer. Okay, and if I try to throw at the middle now from that same position, it under rotates, so I've got to move back. Okay, if I still try to throw at the low position, it's going to under rotate. Wow, that one's stuck. As you can see, though, they're still slightly under rotating. So normally what I would actually have to do to make that stick is move back even a little bit more. Now you can see just that little bit of change in distance, and maybe you can't see it in the video, hopefully you can. Zoom in if you have to. It changes things. So the point is, if I have 10 different dots on that, I have to keep making micro adjustments to my position. Hopefully I'm not out of camera. That's the thing you've got to do. You've got to look at your rotation. Slightly under rotated. I can't get any closer on the top. Nice over rotated, under rotated. You have to start looking at the position of your knife. You have to understand that this means I'm too close. This means I'm too far away. Dead on. So that's a quick bit about board targets. They're certainly fun to do. We've enjoyed some competitions, thanks to a few friends who introduced them a couple of years ago in my area. The nice thing is you can get 2 of them set up side by side, safe distance apart, of course, and you can have 2 people throwing simultaneously at their own respective targets. It adds a really good dynamic to the competition rather than watching one guy or woman go out and throw, one person throw. You can see 2 people go at it head to head. And normally the way we do that is we don't allow people just to throw at random. They throw, you throw, you throw, you throw, you throw, you throw, you throw. And then it's basically a counted, or you have to clear the targets. It's really fun competition. It usually gets the crowd into it more than just watching one person throw over and over and over again. That's pretty much it for boards. So remember, keep your axes straight, keep your knives straight. Spears do okay on them as well. Remember, the more surface area that's hitting those fibers, if you're not hitting between those fibers, if you're cutting them, the more that hits that, the less likely it is to stick, even with a nice solid shot. So you imagine trying to cut through the fibers completely sideways. Knives don't have quite as much problem with that. Fortunately, you can throw those, and we did an earlier video where we're actually throwing at 45 degrees, or 90 degrees. I'm not sure if I can do it on camera. They'll still throw and stick, and they'll often stick sideways, where axes just, they're going to fall out. Hope I got all that in frame. We're going to check. Thank you.